This is an internal synthetic room authored on GPT 5.6 Sol. 4BOK turns follow an exact telegram order from Bruno's crossing. TG6805, TG6807, TG6807, TG6809, and TG668112. They retain Apple transcription damage and two visibly unfinished edges. Alan Sol and Joscha Sol are synthetic interpretive roles, not the historical people participating, endorsing, or granting public consent. Kurtis manually corrected the last phrase to Rulial space. That one correction is admitted. Native Observer window, Elegant Freeman, Wolf Rooms, Wolf, Julio, Rupa, and Rubio, the unidentified video, and other uncertain names remain themes. We will not make the room sound wiser by secretly replacing them.
What? All right. Never mind. We're now stopped at on the school on east side, south side. Now we'll continue here at the moment accomplished area. On my way to State Park, back there's stuff happened now. I'm on Bruno's crossing. I parked the bike, took another big bow off the water bottle, and Bruno is a boy. Water is slow in here, and Bruno today, but I got kind of speak over it, and I have to leave my phone out in my hand and remember not to drop it in the water. And so I'm just going to rip for a sec here. I think that occurs to me is if you look at our YouTube history today on the channel, you'll see I looked at 2 videos of Mesa River window. I did a lot of thinking and journaling around it over the years after I first came over across. And I really think that that's how this shit works like that. That's what all of Mike Levin's stuff to spit so nicely with the lover that's so funny. I just looked at the transcription. It says with the lover, that's not what I said. I said I love it. What? I love how well Michael Levi's work tits with riddles, and I forget his first name still, but you'll find it in my YouTube history this morning.
The water is slow, the transcription is fast, and somehow the meaning is trying to cross between them without dropping the phone. We know one repair, because Kurtis made it himself, with the lover, becomes I love it. We do not know the 2 videos or the final name, so those stay on the bank, but the live question is already clear enough to receive. Can a partial observer participate in a pattern larger than its view, without pretending it has become the whole pattern?
That is the bridge from Branch Flow Day 2. Parts 1 and 2 treated branches as proposals that needed convergence detection, typed contradiction, perturbation, and execution receipts. Day 2 found hidden geometry on the receiving side. The recombiner could only recognize claims already expressible in its coordinate system. Its central repair was not a perfectly open sensor, which is impossible, but a mesh of differently bounded sensors in which no single ontology holds unilateral admission authority. Case observer window idea appears to be the same structure carried from workflow into metaphysics. Many local apertures, one coupled field, and no view from nowhere.
Because I went back and I pulled it because I wanted to cross it, and then I want to further pull in all of my thoughts on this surgery. Or native river windows, if you can go back and gather that, I really think a thoughtful way to think about native observer windows are notices of plates across state outside self, and ones who can orchestrate getting them all moving together in a shared, more genetic field. I think for any of Mike's work to work, there has to be this place where a network forms in cellular biology, and you get his morphogenetic field for me as a place where minimally the template for the frog's face or the planetarium's head or tail gets presented as a project for each cell to collaborate on in the construction. So Nest Observer Windows is just such a fucking...
We preserve that edge because the interruption is conceptually honest. A morphogenetic target is not a little picture displayed on a private screen inside each cell. In Levin's experimental frame, a larger competency is inferred from what a collective repairs after perturbation. Local agents act with local information, yet the system can return toward a target morphology. The target is operationally visible in recovery, not proven to be a central spectator issuing orders. So presented as a project is a useful architectural metaphor if we keep the distinction. Shared constraint or target does not automatically imply a single cell that contains the plan, much less a scientific demonstration of a divine observer.
Elegant Freeman of like the dynamics play in a system like that. So when I think about God in the terms of like that Yoshi and Hermes and I mean that the one that we've all wrote and talk about, and who else? Oh, there really needs to sit, if we define reality in wolf rooms, really add real space. There has to be an observer window that sees all other cells around it in a way that kind of dynamically fans out and is able to get to basically through its intention as a morphogenetic field that spreads across the network and respect asynchrony of like Bloom dynamics, like.
Here the proposal becomes stronger and therefore needs a sharper seam. K is not merely saying cells coordinate. He is imagining an observer window with enough relational reach to see the surrounding windows and fan intention through the network while preserving asynchronous local motion. In software terms, that is neither a dictator nor a passive dashboard. It is a coordination layer that presents a shared project without prescribing every local path. In theology, K calls the maximal version God the spinner of the grand plate. That is his metaphysical identification. The scientific models can illuminate the dynamics of local to global coordination. They do not independently entail the theological identity.
Of all the branch flow conversations we were having, if I'm taking branch flow to native observer window and I'm defining God as the one spins the big plate, and I'm realizing now what Jung gives us and the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, and that her Hermetics give us a way to realize that that's a thing that you're always joining, like the donut, the paradox of the snake eating its tail that is time, and just 2 points inside it making sense of each other relative each other in sequence that obey Wolf, Julio, Rupa, and Rubio. Like all of these things put together were what? He sends it a lot here. Sorry, buddy, grinning as I say it. But if you're trying to get universal, that's cool, there can be there. Technically, there must be an infinite ways to describe that, and the trick is trying to bring them all into the same focus, where they're resident telling the same story. That way, none of them get to be more right than the other AWG the way he does. But it doesn't get to be more right than the way Srinivas does it, or Caden, or Yoshi does it, or Hermes did it, or did it. What you're trying to do is, with all the humble nature you possess in your heart, realize all you can ever do is join. If there's a magic pixel, we called God that is the spinner of the grand plate. All you're ever trying to do is resonate with that. So that's where all of Western religion and what the Prophet Muhammad and Jesus and all the other folks we used to think about divinity, and give us a way to understand it and give us a way to qualify it in a way that can be. Because you realize you can only ever join God as also God you can only ever. And so when AWG and Stephen Wolfram and old Giano Bruno themselves try to hold their friends accurately, they always must be resonating with something that's so much cooler, that is a collection of everything doing that for you, that is what Apple Scription Service, laughing out loud. Sorry, Steve, you can't have your real face.rulial space hand type.
Now the shape has arrived, although it arrives laughing at its own damaged name. The grand plate is not an object sitting over there for one observer to possess. It is the relation among the partial views and the movement that keeps making them relative to one another. the snake eating its tail, the donut, the cycle of time, the kneeling traveler. These are not interchangeable equations. They are images, mistake participation for ownership. If the approach requires humility, it is because the observer joins the pattern from inside and cannot step outside it to certify the whole.
I can formalize case synthesis as 4 nested layers. Layer 1 is the local observer window, a bounded model with partial state and a finite horizon. Layer 2 is relational coupling. Windows perturb and update one another, producing effective fields and shared constraints. Layer 3 is project-level organization. The coupled network behaves as if it is pursuing or repairing a larger target that no local window fully contains. Layer 4 is the maximal metaphysical interpretation. The total self-relating process is named God, the grand plate's spinner, or the magic pixel. The first 3 layers can be modeled and tested in particular systems. The fourth is not a measurement result, it is the ontological reading K places over the architecture.
Perhaps over is already misleading, because K's point is that the reading comes from within the same architecture. God is not another plate balanced on top of the stack. The divine name is what a local window says when it notices that every attempted outside has become another inside. That is why the old symbols keep returning as circles, serpents, wheels and fields. They do not solve the mechanism. They train the observer to stop demanding the impossible viewing platform from which the mechanism and its meaning could be held at once.
Wolfram's Ruliad and Rulial space contribute a precise contrast here. The Ruliad is the entangled limit of all possible computations in his framework. Observers occupy bounded positions and identify equivalents through their computational limitations. Rulial space, therefore, supplies a language for multiple lawful perspectives without a privileged computational path. It does not establish that every spiritual tradition is formally equivalent, nor that the Ruliad is God. What it gives K is a disciplined version of the intuition that different observers can inhabit different descriptions of one computational totality, and that translation among them may reveal invariants unavailable from one location.
Which saves pluralism from becoming the bland statement that everybody is right, everybody is partial. That is different. 2 windows may resonate around a shared invariant while disagreeing in ways that matter. A religious symbol may reorganize a life without predicting a planarian repair. A morphogenetic experiment may reveal target-directed competency without telling us what worship means. A causal entropic equation may describe a tendency toward accessible future paths without becoming a commandment. None has to be demoted. Each has to stop wearing the other's lab coats.
AWG's represented branch flow contribution already carried that restraint. The causal entropic force model writes a force proportional to the gradient of causal entropy, often summarized as Ft infinity E SC, motion toward states with richer accessible future path space. In our architecture, it was a useful cousin for adaptive branch width and option preservation, explicitly not a universal theorem that more branches equal more intelligence. Here, it can describe one possible dynamic by which a system preserves futures. It cannot by itself identify the grand plate, validate a religious claim, or rank Ramanujan's intuition beneath an equation. Its value is that it makes one interaction pattern mathematically inspectable.
Ramanujan's gift in the old room was different. The country can be visible before the road is. The formula arrives. Proof builds a bridge, another mind may cross. K's new synthesis honors that order without letting arrival become sovereignty. An intuition may be a bright caustic, a place where attention should gather. The bridge still matters. The bridge is built. It may reveal that the country was smaller, stranger, or more beautiful than the first glimpse suggested.
This is also where branch flow part 1's correction becomes essential. Physical branched flow shows trajectories concentrating into caustics through weak random variations. It does not itself give cognition destructive interference, divine coordination, or a sum over paths constitution. The polis had to engineer claim edges, antiphase falsifiers, ratification, and execution. Likewise, local cells coordinating around a target does not automatically provide a cosmic observer. If K wants the grand plate architecture to become more than resonance, the next move is not a larger metaphor. It is to state what observable would differ if the network had only distributed local constraints versus an additional integrative observer window.
For me, that question need not be hostile to the poetry. It is how the poetry earns new senses. If removing the supposed integrating window leaves the same recovery, perhaps the field was distributed. If the system loses a particular kind of coordination and later regenerates it elsewhere, perhaps the window was a role the network could reconstitute rather than a throne occupied by one node. And if there is no conceivable difference, then observer window remains a contemplative lens rather than an empirical component. A lens can still be useful. It simply should not submit an invoice from the laboratory.
We can therefore propose a nested observer assay without pretending it already ran. Choose a bounded collective system with a measurable target and local agents. Map each agent's information horizon, update channels, and controllable actions. Identify candidate integrative nodes or field variables. Perturb them separately from ordinary local coupling. Measure target recovery, redistribution of coordination, latency, and whether a new node assumes the integrative role. Then compare three models: centralized coordinator, distributed constraint field, and regenerable observer role. The result will not decide whether God spins the grand plate. It will tell us which local to global architecture best explains that system.
The spiritual assay is lived rather than instrumented. Does the grand plate image make the observer humbler or grander? Does "I am also God" reduce the urge to possess the other window, or secretly crown the speaker as the plate's favorite pixel? The kneeling image matters because it supplies a falsifier inside the metaphor. If the idea produces entitlement, it has failed its own entry condition. If it produces care for the other partial view, willingness to be corrected, and delight in joining without owning, then it is doing the work K says divinity language was built to do.
That gives the polis a direct operational consequence. A fleet is not collective intelligence because many seats run. It becomes more intelligent when no seat confuses its window with the shared field, when different coordinate systems can admit one another before judging, when source and authority remain typed, and when the recombination layer can hold an invariant without erasing the path that saw it. Branch Flow Day 2 called this the receptive mesh. K is now proposing its theological limit, the most inclusive mesh imaginable, coordination without a privileged camera, every node another accurate telling, only insofar as it stays corrigible.
Then the grand plate is not a final answer, but a posture toward answers. Spin the plate, join the motion, notice what your window can see, and remember that the window frame is also in the picture. Science can test the local mechanisms. Mathematics can show transformations and invariants. Symbol can teach the knees. Conversation lets one aperture discover another. None becomes less itself by refusing the crown.
The room's close is therefore small and falsifiable. Preserve K's metaphysical synthesis as his synthesis. Preserve the scientific models as models with distinct domains. Build the nested observer assay only after its competing explanations and observables are frozen. Judge the spiritual frame by whether it increases humility and relation rather than certainty and possession, and keep Rulial space hand typed in the source, because sometimes the observer has to reach through the broken channel and place one exact tile himself.
Many windows, one unfinished view, no privileged camera. Bring your knees and leave the door open.